was a late afternoon with the sky painted in colors ranging from golden to scarlet red, a palette that seemed to have sprung from an artist's imagination. The breeze blew gently, but it carried the weight of untold stories and secrets kept behind the windows of the old brick houses lining the main street. It was in this upper-middle-class neighborhood, where everything seemed clean and organized, that the story began to come to life. If you're watching now, comment from where you're following us, because this story could happen anywhere, even on your street. On the impeccable sidewalk, with shrubs trimmed as if someone had measured them with a ruler, the elderly widow, Donna Eloisa, observed the street with eagle eyes. Her floral dress contrasted with her pale skin and her wrinkled hands that trembled slightly. She clutched her leather purse tightly, as if it held something that could protect her from the outside world. She had lived alone since her husband, a retired colonel, passed away 5 years ago, leaving her an inheritance of loneliness and an eternal distrust of what she couldn't control. The neighbors respected her, but kept their distance. They knew any misstep could unleash her sharp tongue. Halfway down the path, Malik appeared, a 17-year-old black boy with a shy smile, lively eyes, and a backpack on his shoulders, returning home after helping his mother with the weekly groceries. Malik's heart was pounding, not out of fear but from the anxiety of getting home in time to prepare dinner, knowing his mother had an important meeting that night. He wasn't the type to take risks. He was studious, respectful, and carried the responsibility of being the man of the house since his father left them. However, in that neighborhood, his skin color was more noticeable than his character. Upon noticing the boy approaching, Donna Eloisa narrowed her eyes. She didn't recognize that face. She clutched her purse to her chest and, in a surge of panic, pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. Her mind, forged by old fears, screamed that it was better to be safe than sorry. The call was automatic, 190. Her shaky voice came out more like a sigh of relief. "Police? There's a suspicious boy on the street. He's walking in front of my house. Please come quickly, I'm scared." Meanwhile, Malik, oblivious to the storm brewing around him, stopped to tie his shoe. It was all so normal for him, just another day, that he didn't suspect his mere presence on that sidewalk was enough to turn Donna Eloisa's routine upside down. The sound of sirens soon cut through the air, echoing down the streets like thunder. Tires screeched against the asphalt as the patrol car came to an abrupt stop, and 2 uniformed armed officers jumped out, as if expecting a crime in progress. Malik's once calm gaze turned confused as he saw the officers pointing at him. One of them, a burly man with a stern expression, approached with his hand on his gun, while the other, younger, held handcuffs, ready to use them. "Hands up, kid," ordered the older officer, his voice heavy with authority and suspicion. Malik slowly raised his hands, eyes wide, chest heaving, as he tried to understand why he was being treated like a criminal. His heart was beating so fast it felt like it might burst out of his mouth. "I didn't do anything, sir. I'm just going home," he said, his voice choked with fear and humiliation. Donna Eloisa watched from the sidewalk, her chest puffed with pride for her civic courage. She felt safe, believing she had prevented a greater evil. But something in that scene made her heart waver. The look in the boy's eyes, the fear etched on his face, the injustice that suddenly seemed to have leapt from TV screens onto her own street. The younger officer, with a tense expression, hesitated for a second, but the older one kept his tone firm. "Documents! I want to see your documents now," he shouted, approaching Malik with heavy steps. With trembling hands, Malik tried to open his backpack to get his ID, but he was interrupted by a rough shove that nearly knocked him off balance. "Easy there, kid. Don't do anything suspicious," said the older officer, his tone mixing threat and suspicion. The silence that fell over the street was broken only by the sound of the wind and the stifled sob Malik tried to hold back. The injustice hung like a thick, suffocating cloud, heavy with everything society pretends not to see. Then something happened. A black car with tinted windows approached slowly, stopping a few meters from the scene. The door opened with a sharp click, and out stepped a tall black woman with a firm posture and determined eyes. She wore a dark suit and a shiny badge hanging from her neck. She walked toward the patrol car with confident steps, like someone who knows what they're doing and what they represent. The officers, surprised, straightened their backs upon seeing her, as if they'd just realized they were being watched by someone with authority. She looked at Malik, her eyes brimming with indignation, then fixed her gaze on the officers with a coldness that could cut steel. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," she said, her voice firm, controlled, but laced with restrained emotion. The older officer stammered something like, "It's a routine procedure, ma'am." But his words died in his mouth when she raised her badge toward him. "I'm the FBI chief in this city, and this is my son," she declared, her voice steady, almost solemn, as silence fell heavily over everyone. The world seemed to stop in that moment. Donna Eloisa's eyes widened, her body trembling as if hit by a gust of wind. The younger officer looked at his partner with a panicked expression. Malik, still with his hands raised, was breathing heavily, tears finally breaking through the dam he'd tried to hold. The woman, strong, unyielding, a mother, approached her son and hugged him tightly, as if she wanted to shield him from the entire world. Then she looked at the widow, who now seemed like a frightened child, and said only, "You'll never understand what it's like to live in fear every day because of the color of your skin." She took a deep breath and raised her chin, as if carrying the weight of an entire nation on her shoulders. The older officer lowered his eyes, embarrassed, while the younger one seemed to want to disappear. The wind blew through the trees, and the sound of dry leaves dancing on the asphalt set an almost mournful rhythm for that scene, which felt like something out of a movie. Donna Eloisa stood frozen, her lips parted, her heart racing. Suddenly, she didn't know what to say or think. That woman, that mother, didn't fit into the stereotypes the widow had silently collected for years. The FBI chief, without breaking her gaze, ordered in a firm tone, "Release my son, now." The older officer, visibly uncomfortable, hesitated for a second that felt eternal before unlocking the handcuffs that were about to restrain Malik. His hands trembled, and his expression mixed shame and fear of repercussions. Malik slowly lowered his arms, breathing deeply, as if he could finally fill his lungs with air. His mother stayed by his side, her hand resting on his shoulder, steady as a rock, conveying strength and protection. Silence reigned absolute. Donna Eloisa felt the weight of shame beginning to burn inside her, like embers hidden beneath words she dared not speak. The scene was a mirror reflecting her own flaws, her own suspicions, her own fears, a fear that now seemed so small in the face of that mother's dignity and that son's pain. The younger officer, his face pale, took a step back, avoiding the chief's gaze. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. He tried to say, but his voice faded into the air. She took a deep breath before responding, with resolve and pain in her eyes. "You just what? Just did what you always do? Judged, suspected, threatened?" Her words were like hammer blows on stone, slowly cracking the prejudice that had hidden there for so long. Malik, still with teary eyes, lowered his head, his soul marked by a wound he'd heard about so many times, but now felt in his skin, his flesh, his spirit. The FBI chief looked at him and gently caressed his face. "You're strong, my son. Stronger than many men I've seen, but no one deserves to go through this." Malik pressed his lips together, trying to hold back the sob that insisted on escaping. He knew this story wasn't just about him. It was about all those who carry the burden of being judged by their skin color, the neighborhood they live in, or simply for being there. The FBI chief turned to Donna Eloisa, and her eyes were no longer just those of a mother. They were the eyes of authority, of someone who knew the pain of every tear, the weight of every injustice. "You know, Mum," she said, her voice calm but sharp as a blade, "I understand fear. We all fear something, but it's not fair for your fear to steal someone's dignity. It's not fair for it to bring pain where there's no guilt." Donna Eloisa felt her legs weaken. The fear that once sustained her now gnawed at her from within, like a plague spreading silently. I didn't know," she murmured, her voice choked, her eyes brimming with shame. "That's what destroys us. Ignorance," the FBI chief continued, her voice firm but filled with an old pain. "Prejudice isn't born ready, it's taught, nurtured, fed with glances, whispers, fears without face or name, but which destroy lives." Malik looked at his mother, and in his eyes was a mix of pain and pride. He understood now that he wasn't alone, that in her, in that woman in a suit and badge, there was a shield against everything the world tried to throw at him. The wind blew stronger, lifting dry leaves that danced around them, as if the street itself were trying to sweep away the invisible filth hanging in the air. The older officer cleared his throat, his voice hoarse, as if swallowing a bitter lump. "Ma'am, we didn't mean to—" But before he could finish, the FBI chief raised her hand, silencing him. "Intentions? Hell is full of good intentions. What you did was humiliate. Mark a young man who could be your son, your grandson, your brother. Her voice trembled with indignation, but there was no shouting, just the pain of someone who'd seen this movie more times than they'd like. For a moment, Malik felt his chest swell with relief. Not because the injustice had been erased. No, the scar would remain forever, but because his mother was there. Not just as a mother, but as a shield, a voice, a symbol of everything he'd always wanted to believe, that justice still exists. Donna Eloisa, with her eyes lowered, felt tears streaming down her wrinkled face, each drop washing away the dirt that words couldn't reach. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice choked, trembling, fragile like crumpled paper that falls apart at a touch. The FBI chief looked at her with resolve, but also with compassion. It's not enough to apologize, ma'am. You have to change. You have to look beyond the skin, the stereotype, the suspicion, because every time you look at someone and see only a threat, you tighten a chain that binds us all. Malik took a deep breath, and for the first time since it all began, he felt a breath of freedom, as if the whole world were ready to give him a second chance. The street seemed quieter now, as if time itself had paused to witness what was happening. The sun was beginning to set behind the houses, painting the sky a deep orange that reflected on the still tense faces. Malik lowered his head, exhausted, as if every word, every tear, every breath had taken a piece of his soul. Donna Eloisa, once proud, now seemed shrunken under the weight of what she'd just witnessed. Not only the power of a determined mother, but the power of a truth that tears through the best-sewn masks. The FBI chief turned to the officers and, with a tone mixing authority and pain, said, "Do your job with justice, protect, yes, but don't condemn before listening. Every person has a story, a heart, a mother. Don't forget that." The younger officer, with teary eyes, merely nodded, while the older one breathed deeply, his face tense as if confronting an uncomfortable reality for the first time. There, in those quiet streets where nothing extraordinary seemed to happen, prejudice had been unmasked, laid bare for anyone willing to see. Malik's mother walked to him and ran her hand through his hair, as she did when he was a child, when the world seemed safer. "You're the most precious thing I have," she said, her voice choked but firm. "And no matter what they do or say, never let them make you believe you're less than anyone." Malik felt tears stream down, mixing shame, fear, and relief, as if all barriers had been broken. "I love you, Mom," he said, his voice low but filled with everything he'd kept in his chest for so long. Donna Eloisa raised her eyes and gazed at that scene. There was something there she couldn't explain, a strength, a dignity, a courage she herself didn't have. The guilt burned her heart, but a sprout of compassion was also born. Small, fragile, but real. She took a step forward, her voice trembling, trying to piece together the words breaking in her throat. I never imagined it would be like this," she said. "I was afraid, yes, but now I see that fear doesn't justify everything. I'm so sorry, truly." The FBI chief looked at her with an expression mixing compassion and severity. "Fear is human," she said, her voice now softer, "but it can't rule us. Fear has to be confronted so justice can flourish." And then she sighed, like someone carrying the weight of many struggles, many pains, and many victories. The wind blew again, lifting dry leaves and carrying away the echoes of the injustices, so many they're pretended not to see. The street, once full of suspicion, seemed different now. Neighbors began appearing at windows, some holding curtains, others with wide eyes surprised by the strength of that woman who had faced injustice head-on. There, in that moment, it wasn't just the story of a mother and son. It was the story of all those who've been judged without being heard, condemned without defense, marked by a color, an origin, a fear that wasn't theirs. The FBI chief knew this. Malik knew this. And now, Donna Eloisa knew it too. The older officer cleared his throat, his face red with shame. "Ma'am," he said, his voice faltering, I'm truly sorry for what happened. Sometimes we act on autopilot, but today I realized that's not how it should be." The FBI chief nodded with a slight tilt of her head, as if accepting the apology but not forgetting the mistake. "I hope this lesson stays with you," she replied, her tone calm but firm. "Because what happened today can't keep happening. Every person deserves respect, and each of you has the duty to ensure that." Malik took a deep breath, feeling his mother's presence like a shield. Donna Eloisa took another hesitant step forward, as if treading unknown territory. "I know I can't erase what I did," she said, her voice weak. "But if one day I can help, I want to try. I don't want to live with this weight." The FBI chief looked into her eyes and saw not just the frightened widow, but a woman who, even if late, was willing to learn. "It's a start," she said in a tone mixing relief and caution. "But remember, change begins with small choices, every day." The sun was almost fully set, and the street began to fill with long shadows. The FBI chief took Malik's hand and began walking with him, like someone choosing the path of dignity even when the road is tough. The officers stepped back, heads lowered, while Donna Eloisa stood there, staring at the ground, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. The wind whispered through the trees, as if the street itself were learning to breathe again. Malik looked at his mother and smiled, a small smile but full of gratitude, and she returned the smile, proud of who he was and who he would still become. The silence that followed was a different silence, heavy with reflections, unspoken promises, and changes beginning to sprout on those sidewalks. And there, under the red-tinged sky, it was understood that true justice begins when fear gives way to love, and compassion triumphs over prejudice.